This is my wedding. You are nothing here.
Mom, who are these people?
She never told her son the truth, until tonight forced it out. The Caldwell-Brooks wedding was the kind of event that people in Westfield, Connecticut talked about for years. The Grand Harrington Ballroom, a towering neoclassical venue with cathedral ceilings, cascading chandeliers, and white marble floors, had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. 240 guests filled round tables dressed in ivory linen, surrounded by towers of white roses and gold candelabras. Crystal flutes caught the light and scattered tiny rainbows across the room. A live string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Photographers circled like satellites, their cameras flashing with relentless precision. Every inch of this night had been planned, curated, and polished to near perfection. At the center of it all stood Ethan Caldwell, tall, broad-shouldered, with warm brown eyes and a quiet kind of confidence. He wore a tailored ivory tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. Ethan was 32 years old, a first-generation college graduate who had built a thriving architectural firm from nothing. He was handsome, yes, but what people remembered most about Ethan was how he looked at his mother. Lorraine Caldwell, 61 years old, sat at table 3 near the edge of the dance floor. She wore a deep plum gown, elegant but modest, and her silver-streaked locks were pinned up in a crown. Her face was soft and warm, the kind of face that made strangers feel instantly comfortable. She had the hands of a woman who had really worked, and she wore that truth without apology. Lorraine had raised Ethan alone after losing her husband Marcus to a sudden heart attack when Ethan was just 9 years old. She had held 3 jobs simultaneously, for years nursing assistant by day, seamstress by evening, and weekend caterer to keep the lights on. She had never asked anyone for sympathy. She had simply endured, and she had done it with grace. Vanessa Brooks Caldwell was seated at the head table beside her new husband, radiant in a custom Vera Wang gown that had cost more than most people's cars. Her dark hair cascaded in loose waves over one bare shoulder. At 29, Vanessa was the daughter of Richard Brooks, founder of Brooks Capital, a private equity firm with offices in New York, London, and Dubai. She had grown up with nannies and tutors, private jets and summer homes in the Hamptons. She was beautiful, magnetic, and accustomed to a world where everything and everyone served a specific function. She smiled often, but the smile rarely reached her eyes. For months, Vanessa had made it quietly, persistently clear that she considered Lorraine an inconvenience. Not loudly, never loudly. It was the polite redirection during planning meetings, the pointed comments about wedding aesthetics whenever Lorraine offered a suggestion, the seating assignment that placed Ethan's mother away from the family table, tucked near the service entrance. Ethan had noticed. He had pushed back gently, carefully, trying to believe it was stress and not something deeper. Lorraine had never once complained. The reception had been underway for nearly 2 hours when Lorraine rose from her seat, champagne glass in hand. She had asked the MC, a round-faced man named Gerald, if she could offer a toast. Gerald had nodded warmly and handed her the microphone. "Good evening," Lorraine began, her voice steady and rich. "My name is Lorraine Caldwell. I am Ethan's mother." The room settled. Glasses were lowered. Phones were raised. "When Ethan was 9 years old," she continued, "he came home from school one afternoon and found me sitting at the kitchen table, crying. He didn't ask why. He just sat down next to me, took my hand, and said, 'Mama, we're going to be okay.' He was 9 years old, and he was right." A few guests wiped their eyes. Ethan stared at his mother from the head table, jaw tight, eyes glistening. "I raised my son to love without conditions," Lorraine said softly, "and I raised him to be worthy of being loved the same way. Tonight, I wish him. That's enough." The words came from Vanessa. Sharp, flat, final. The room went quiet. Lorraine turned slowly toward the head table. Vanessa had risen from her chair, cheeks flushed, eyes hard. "I said that's enough," Vanessa repeated. "Louder now. This is my wedding, not a tribute to your struggles. Not your moment, mine." Lorraine lowered the microphone. She opened her mouth to respond gently, the way she did everything, and that was when it happened. The slap cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot. Vanessa's palm connected with Lorraine's cheek. The champagne glass fell. It shattered across the marble floor like a small explosion. The string quartet stopped mid-phrase. 240 people froze, as though someone had pressed pause on reality itself. Lorraine stood very still. Her hand rose slowly to her cheek. She did not cry. She did not yell. She simply stood there, in her plum gown, with a dignity so enormous it seemed to fill the entire room. Ethan shot to his feet. "Vanessa!" "Don't," Vanessa snapped. Gerald the MC looked like he might faint. Richard Brooks, seated at a nearby table, had gone pale. Several guests began whispering frantically. A woman near the back had started recording on her phone. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next incredible story. If you're enjoying this video, hit the like button and tell us in the comments what you would do if you were in this situation. We read as many comments as possible, and your support helps us bring you more powerful stories every day. Now, let's get back to the drama, because the biggest twist is still ahead. And then from outside the ballroom's grand entrance came the sound. Engines. Deep, powerful, unhurried. The kind of sound that said money didn't need to rush. 3 Rolls-Royce Phantoms, 2 silver, 1 black, rolled to a stop in front of the Harrington's entrance, in perfect, choreographed succession. They gleamed beneath the venue's exterior floodlights, like something out of a film. The vehicles were immaculate, each flying a small flag on the hood. A few guests near the windows had drifted over to look, and now the murmur traveled through the room like electricity. "Who is that? Are those flags? Which country is that?" The ballroom's grand double doors opened. A woman entered first, tall, impeccably dressed in a cream suit, with close-cropped natural hair and a bearing that suggested she had walked into far more important rooms than this one. She scanned the room with calm authority until her eyes landed on Lorraine. Then she walked directly to her. Behind her came 2 men in dark suits, then a man in traditional West African ceremonial dress, deep blue and gold brocade, and finally, a silver-haired woman in her 70s, who moved with deliberate, unhurried confidence, a cane in one hand and a small envelope in the other. Every eye in the ballroom followed them. The woman in the cream suit stopped in front of Lorraine. She took both of Lorraine's hands in hers. "Mama Lorraine," she said softly, in accented English, "we came." The silver-haired woman with the cane stepped forward and spoke next in French. "J'ai reçu l'appel ce matin, et j'aurai parcouru 2 fois la distance." The man in the ceremonial dress spoke in Twi, one of Ghana's primary languages. He pressed his hand to his chest, then to Lorraine's. "Mema nema, aduaneberi ana, biribiara niho, menya ohohowa, abuswa yimu, mene abuswa no." A fourth figure, a younger woman who had entered quietly behind the others, spoke in Portuguese. Her voice broke slightly as she spoke. "Vim para São Paulo com nada além de kit de costura e vontade de ensinar. Fiquei 6 meses. Criei uma cooperativa que hoje emprega 40 mulheres." A fifth man, older, with deep-set eyes and a gray beard, spoke in Mandarin. He bowed his head. "地震发生后，我用3个星期学会了足够的中文，能够直接跟他的家人沟通。我这么做不是为了给谁留下好印象，只是单纯想帮忙." And finally, the woman in the cream suit spoke again, this time in Swahili, then repeated herself in English for the room. "Mama Lorraine has never told anyone who she is. She helped because it was right, not because anyone would know." Ethan Caldwell stood completely still. He had known fragments, pieces here and there, but not the whole picture. He had known his mother traveled. He had not known that her travel had been funded by a quiet international humanitarian organization she had co-founded 15 years ago. With startup capital, she had saved over a decade of working multiple jobs. He had not known about the medical supply initiative in rural Ghana, the rebuilding project in Sao Paulo, the earthquake relief coordination in Sichuan, the refugee legal aid network in Nairobi, the women's cooperative in Senegal. He had not known that the woman who cried at that kitchen table, who told her 9-year-old son that everything would be okay, had spent the years since making sure that was true for hundreds of other people too. The silver-haired woman with the cane opened the small envelope she carried. She unfolded a single sheet of paper and handed it to Gerald the MC without a word. Gerald stared at it. His face changed. He looked up at the room. He cleared his throat. "This," Gerald said, voice barely steady, "is a letter of recognition from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. It is addressed to Mrs. Lorraine Caldwell. It acknowledges her as a founding partner of the Sunrise Covenant Initiative, an organization that has directly served over 12,000 families across 9 countries in the past decade." It was the kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was full of recalculation, full of shame, full of awe. Vanessa Brooks Caldwell stood at the head table, and for the first time in her life, she appeared small. Not because of the Rolls-Royces, not because of the UN letter, but because Lorraine, who had been slapped, who had been dismissed, who had been seated near the service entrance, had not once tried to make herself look bigger. She had simply been exactly who she was, and the world had shown up to confirm it. Ethan walked across the ballroom floor. He did not go to Vanessa. He went to his mother. He wrapped his arms around her and held her the way she had once held him, the way parents hold children, and children hold parents, when words are not enough. Lorraine closed her eyes. "I told you," she whispered into his ear. "We were going to be okay." The Caldwell-Brooks marriage did not survive the night. Ethan and Vanessa's relationship had fractures that the wedding had only made visible. What survived, what mattered, was something else entirely. In the weeks that followed, 3 of Vanessa's own wedding guests reached out to the Sunrise Covenant Initiative to offer funding. 2 more volunteered their professional services. The organization's visibility expanded in ways Lorraine had never sought and never expected. Lorraine returned to her work quietly, as she always had. She asked for no apology. She held no press conference. She simply went back to doing what she had always done, showing up for people who needed someone to show up. If this story moved you, share it. Not because Lorraine needs recognition, but because the world needs more reminders that grace is not weakness, that quiet strength is still strength, and that dignity cannot be taken from someone who has truly claimed it. And if there is someone in your life who has been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed, tell them what Lorraine showed us tonight. The room always finds out who you really are. Like, share, and subscribe. Because stories like this one deserve to be seen.